Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MSDynamicsWorld.com. This week we dive into the Dynamics customer perspective on Microsoft's changing product landscape. And in particular, we look at the position and experiences of a GP customer with a deep on-premise history with Microsoft. My guest is Jeff Frye. He is a systems analyst at Hunt Brothers Pizza, a food chain with more than 7,000 locations in the U.S., and they are based in Nashville, Tennessee. They're also a longtime GP customer. I met Jeff at a recent Dynamics conference, but I'd known him longer online. He has routinely been someone who speaks his mind about the needs of his company and how those needs sometimes conflict with Microsoft's latest product positioning and messaging. Since Microsoft is still very much in a transition phase with the Dynamics product line and defining its role among other product priorities in the commercial business, this seemed like a great time to hear from Jeff and get his customer perspective. So let's get started. Okay, Jeff Frye, welcome to the MSDW Podcast. Thanks for being here.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I was glad to get the opportunity, and I thought we would start by letting you just introduce yourself in a little bit more detail, maybe talk about where you're at and some of the responsibilities you have that tie into the Dynamics GP community and sort of the Microsoft ecosystem overall.
No, I've been a long-time GP user, starting out as an accountant to put in charge of implementing a system that I didn't realize I needed or even wanted at the time years and years ago at a previous employer. I've grown a lot since then to take on more and more stuff, including payroll HR within the system. Once again, I don't have to do that anymore, thankfully, but I was a consultant briefly for a partner here in Nashville before leaving there and going back into working in the customer world. I am a systems analyst is the official title, but I'm just generally the one person in charge of the ERP system here at my company, Hunt Brothers Pizza. Been here for 3.5 years. Generally speaking, I guess that makes me an internal consultant. People ask me for things and I provide it, including just day-to-day support, but also going out there and using my experience and finding add-ins and additional capabilities into our GP system, which they've had for probably 8 years before I even got here. So we have a pretty mature system with lots and lots of add-ins and customizations and such.
Great. So your role is really one that you have good knowledge of the system itself. You have good knowledge of sort of what's happening in the ERP space, especially in the GP space in terms of the core software, add-ons, and you also have to listen to the users in your company, like in the financial department, people who have to deal with payroll, like you were saying, and be responsive to them as it relates to the use of GP and related software. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct. Mostly they just need data for payroll anymore. They don't do payroll within GP
Okay.
anymore. But in terms of, the payroll people are amongst the people I do have to get data for, especially for commissions and for salespeople and such. But they are generally just an internalized customer of mine. I am completely responsible for keeping them happy, and they get more than one opportunity to let my bosses know whether they're happy or not happy with what I'm doing here. So,
and I guess we should give our listeners a little bit more background from my perspective of why I asked you to be on the podcast here today and talk with you. You're someone who I've known in a way for several years. You've been a reader of MS Dynamics World, and you were someone who took the initiative to comment and share your views in response to pieces that we wrote. And then I got a chance to just very randomly run into you at an event or see your name tag and say, "Hey, are you the same Jeff Frye who actually who shares their views on our site?" And you were, so we started chatting, and yeah, you've got a unique view, I think, on where things are at. Since, like you said, you've been a partner, or you worked for a partner, you represent a customer now who, and I want to ask, as a GP customer, would you say your company is a happy GP customer? Would you say you're getting what you need to out of the software?
Yes, very, very happy GP customer. Just lots of history with GP and not a lot of folks in the user base. I have multiple bosses based on one of the 6 offices that I have users sitting at. generally speaking, everybody's happy with what we're going. Things could always be better. Things could run faster, but we like the environment we're in. We like the number of add-ons from the various ISVs we can incorporate it or have incorporated. The E1 product line we're really into and have a lot of those,
Hmm.
for example. And we just, yeah, I would say we're really happy with that.
And I guess I kind of knew that. And one of the things I always sense in getting your feedback on things is that you're very happy and perhaps a little, I guess maybe the thing you seem like you're a little unhappy with, and feel free to correct me here, but is that you sense a lot of, sort of outside influence at Microsoft that's maybe not listening to you or being responsive to where the position your company is in right now, and how it's meeting its needs today. I don't know, is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct. And I do differentiate between the nice folks in Fargo working for Microsoft and, and the folks that work other places for Microsoft, the bosses, in other words. I've never had anything but positive experiences with the Fargo people, the former
Yeah.
Great Plains office folks. They are responsive, but I just feel like I just get a sense that they're hamstrung by a leadership that wants to take things a different direction from what this big customer base currently has. And it's just, it's subtle and sometimes not so subtle manipulation of things that I identify as a threat to what my company likes and wants to do, and
Yeah.
even what we want to do in the future.
Could you maybe give an example? I mean, what's something that you would call one of your company's core values or one of its core plans that is contrary to that direction?
Well, staying with GP is the future for right now. For nobody has brought up
Hmm.
moving to anything else. We have recently moved on to a hosting situation where we have GP
Okay.
on, at a data center, and that was a little bit of a change for us. But it allowed us to keep people in the environment they are used to, which is the GP environment, and doing things without having to relearn anything other than how to connect to Citrix or remote desktop. There's a lot of people that would identify that changing ERP systems would mean a lot of almost downtime learning a new system. Everybody's gone through this ERP system change before. But it's, we are a growth company, even though we're privately held and numbers aren't out there. We just, we'd rather spend time growing our business than keeping up and changing an accounting system that
Hmm.
works and meets all our needs right now.
Well, it just so happens that the time we scheduled to talk here this week, there's just been a very well, a small flurry or a flurry of a couple of discussions, and there's even another one that I have sort of in the works that I'm going to be publishing. Actually, it's from the NAV side, but it's in the same theme of, what is the future of GP? So, you mentioned you migrated to a data center, but do you watch the roadmap? Do you try to prioritize being up to date on GP software, staying near the front of the roadmap?
Yes, I'd prefer being in the front of the roadmap. We've had a recent ISV addition that has sort of held us back a little bit from getting to
Mm,
2016. And they've just completed that. So we expect to be on 2016 R2 within the next month or so. Hopefully, fingers
that's not
crossed.
bad. When
Uh,
when I've heard people say that first part. We have an ISV solution that's holding us back, but it's like it could be for a much earlier version. People can
well,
really get stuck that way.
we were hoping to be on 2016 earlier last year, and this
Oh,
ISV
okay.
in particular just sort of, they were the only one. And I kept hearing, 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and the most of the year went away, and finally came out with it in December.
Yeah.
So, but then again, going to 2016 R2 hopefully wasn't a big jump for them, and they said it'd be 2 weeks, which I kind of laughed to myself when I heard 2 weeks. But it seems to be the universal time frame for anything. But I'm more comfortable being at the front because I like to get those new features and I like to show those new features to the users. The dock attach was a big thing, and the improvement
Hmm.
of the dock attach is going to be a big hit for those folks. It just they got tired of hearing me promise sometime in the next month or so. So, but hopefully, I'll once I get that going and get this upgrade, it'll set us up to where I don't have to worry about it until this time next year.
And what about, since we're talking about basically the latest available release, there's also the new web client. Is that, you mentioned Citrix earlier, is the web client interesting for your users or for a segment of them?
Yes, it is. I found at least the accountants here at the in my company really get confused by the remote desktop. And I can see a great promise in the web client, which I was very hopeful for going into Amplify, where we met for the first time last year. And
Right.
I very quickly became disillusioned with that version of the web client because of some missing stuff that we use very frequently, primarily creating files and importing files and having those be stored in a specific location. I'm sure I some people sitting in the breakout sessions at Amplify got tired of me asking the questions. But to me, that's me wanting to almost get us to the cloud, and I'm not against going to the cloud or stuff. I just would prefer my environment be the one that goes to the cloud instead of somebody creating another ERP system for me to try to shove 85 users in six cities. Getting them to use and whatever. If I had a web client that looked like what they're used to, it would be a lot easier to push and keep everybody maintained. And just to clear things up, my angst about things is tied more to my customers' feelings or my coworkers or my team's feelings. Because right now they're comfortable, and moving to another system to be on the cloud would be more about making life easier for me than it is for making life easier to them. And some people may. I'm for change, but in terms of this, I'd rather have had my environment just be picked up and moved or made available where people had a choice to be on the cloud or come back where they're used to being, which is the client.
In reading some of the things you've written about recently, I also got the sense that perhaps you felt a little bit of like there was a little bit of a pressure cell on Microsoft's part to talk up things that either showed that they didn't understand where you were coming from, or perhaps didn't show you a sort of a level of value that would justify it based on, like you said, the place you're at now, which is, like you said, some comfortable users and fairly up to date on some of the latest software.
Yes, I do believe the folks at Microsoft, or at least some of them, are a little tone deaf to the audience. Opening up GPUG with a multi-hour presentation on a product nobody actually owns, the Dynamics 365, while everybody's there to learn about the products they have bought, have paid for, and continue to invest in. That was completely in a different direction than Microsoft should have taken, and it sort of wells up that knot in your stomach that maybe Microsoft isn't interested in this customer base. They're more interested in putting everybody into a pay-as-you-go cloud situation where they own the cloud, the file software, and the data storage.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. And I would have to say, just from my perspective, being at that same event where it wasn't just GP users, there were NAV users, AX users, CRM users. The GP users took that event the worst, I would have to say. It was probably the least, I think they saw it as the least relevant to them. I think still the only people in the GP space that seem to be paying close attention are, I would say, the current partners, whether it's resellers or ISV partners of Microsoft, who obviously are paying very close attention to that cloud focus and where the product roadmaps are going for those. But I think it's going to, and I know there's going to be like a migration path if you wanted to move yourself from GP to 365 for financials at least. But I mean, realistically, I'd be amazed if 5 companies that sent people to the GPUG Summit event, were on that list, next year. It would just be unless they were perhaps on some old because I have seen this too at other conferences. There's GP customers who are on very old versions that just can't get upgraded for whatever reason, and someone might just have had enough of it and say, well, the heck with this, we'll just go, we're so far behind that we're just going to move to something totally different and start fresh. But hard to imagine too many other scenarios from my perspective. I don't know if you picked up on anything else in your talks with other customers, other users.
Well, I don't. I participate occasionally with the local chapter for GPUG, and they are different customers than I am in terms they're user customers, and like I said before, I'm
Uh,
more administrator customer. You know,
mm-hmm.
they're talking. They don't go out and worry about what's coming or not coming. They will question what happened to FRX or what happened to Management Reporter or any of the other things Microsoft bought or developed and quickly changed their, or not so quickly changed their minds about.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, Project Green just ran through my head. But in terms, when we met, I think I made a comment to you that it was kind of nice being at Amplify because it was kind of different from Convergence because there wasn't AX and CRM people sucking the oxygen out of the room. Because for years
Yeah.
at Convergence, Microsoft had shifted almost all the focus to those products, even though a majority of the people there at any given time were there for GP.
Yeah, GP was definitely seen as, I mean, even, I think I went to the first Convergence that I probably went to was 7 or 8 years ago at this point. And yeah, I mean, they had turned their focus in MBS to enterprise by that point. This was GP had long been the sort of the catalyst for Convergence and the dominant solutions in the portfolio, but they had already changed over to a focus on enterprise at that point. And yeah, it just didn't find, there was just I mean, despite the enthusiasm of the people who went there for GP material, and the event wasn't built for them any longer, even at that point. So there was no one like when Convergence ended. I think a large percentage had already sort of given up on Convergence if they were GP focused. They were sort of written it off already, and weren't all that sad to see it go.
Yeah, I was close to giving up at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, that's
And
what I heard a lot of. People who were close to giving up. They would still go. There was still a lot to get out of it, but it wasn't what they wanted it to be.
that last Convergence in Atlanta, where
Mm-hmm.
the first breakout session after the keynote, where product line folks stayed together. We GP users, once again the biggest group in the, was relegated to a back room and pushed to the back of the hall
Mm,
of the towards back of the convention center, and they brought in motivational and business speakers and such. It's like, yeah, this probably, and that was when the rumors started about, yeah, this is going to be the last Convergence. And I remember
right.
Microsoft, no, it's not going to be the last Convergence. There's going to be New Orleans next year. Lo and behold, March it was gone. So
Yeah, yeah, and it was replaced with something else that was fairly unrelated to GP. Totally, maybe no, I shouldn't say that. It was totally unrelated to GP. There was nothing about GP at that event, and then they just folded it totally this year. But really, there's really no Microsoft event anymore at all for any Dynamics products. Really, any focus on that. I think it's all being farmed out, and a little bit gets rolled into other events. WPC, not that you probably attend that, but that does tend to have some good Dynamics content. Not as much for GP. But yeah, I think people saw the writing on the wall after that, like you said.
well, I got to give kudos to GPUG for the Amplify conference last, I guess it was May, throwing together something
Yeah.
that focused, that quick. It was really, really more helpful to me, I thought, than the main GPUG Summit
Mm-hmm.
conference. But because GPUG's going to be on the other end of the road I'm on in October, I figured I had to make an appearance there instead of going to Anaheim this year for Amplify. Once
That's right, and they're going to be in Nashville, aren't they?
yes. Everybody's
Um,
welcome to come to Nashville.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've never been. So I guess the other main theme that sort of popped up just this week, as I was saying before, was this sort of debate among people who you probably, like you were saying before, probably relate to a little more closely than the users, which is the partners, and this sort of debate that's sprung up about how fast is Microsoft really moving its focus toward 365, and how quickly is it really taking its focus off of GP, and to some extent, the same debate's happening with NAV as well. How fast is it taking its focus off of that in favor of a world that's all about 365? And we saw three sort of competing or different views on that this week. One came from a blog post by Peter Jokel, and I apologize, Peter, if I'm mispronouncing your name, who really had, I would say, the pessimist's view that GP is not long for this world. It's sort of the writing's on the wall and it'll be disappearing. And we had a very interesting response just today, I believe, from Martin Olson at E1, who who really went point by point through Peter's essay and gave counterpoints to almost all of it based on his own experience. And then we had on our site a feature piece with the new GPUG chairman, whose name I'm blanking on here, but who really, I think, came more on to Martin Olson's from E1 onto his side of things, that, GP is strong. It has a long life left to live. And then I should add, the one other that I have, like I said, brewing is a sort of a nav perspective from another SMB partner who, this is a slightly different view that, Microsoft is moving faster than people expect on their progress with 365. So that's maybe the other observation that you might factor into this whole debate about where Microsoft's really at and what it really means for, the future of each of those products. And you fall somewhere on what side of that do you fall on, Jeff? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I guess like everything, I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm maybe a little closer to Peter's perspective. I don't think in terms of doom and gloom, because whatever happens, it's not going to happen quickly. I just get, my perspective is I feel like Microsoft is going to turn GP slowly into a legacy system, something that they can sell against. That was how I originally got into GP, is we had a quote-unquote legacy system at a previous employer, and we needed to get to something modern and such. The very, very thin roadmap that was finally posted about GP sort of built on that perspective for me. That just seemed like, they used, I think, the word big boulders. No big boulders, just customers' most requested things. That sounds a lot like what companies that have legacy systems have been promised. And, I have I'm sitting on a system with a bunch of users. I guess I'm in the, I'm on the SMB side, medium-sized business. I have a bunch of customers that like to go to Convergence and like to learn about the new things, and really, really took to them. And without those big boulders, they're still going to be happy, but, we're paying for part of our support fees for those big boulders, or traditionally have been paying for those big boulders. But, if in place of big boulders, they spend time at conferences telling us, we've done this cool thing inside of Dynamics 365, whichever version of Dynamics 365 it is. That's stuff that, I feel could have been done in GP. GP isn't on a dead technology. The original web client notwithstanding because of Silverlight. But it could go on and on and on and be developed just as well as it has been. And maybe even its interface picked up and moved to the cloud, or whatever they want to call the cloud. It wouldn't even bother me if they changed the name. But it's just something, combine that with, we've hired some BI people who are moving into Power BI and such, and seeing all the stuff that's offered in Office 365 that they have no intent to offer in other versions of Office. It is sort of, once they put the same name or type of name to it, it sort of indicated to me that the 365 product lines from a company that is now led by somebody who came from the cloud side and has a staff completely from the cloud side. It just sort of makes me think these quote-unquote legacy systems they've inherited, they're just going to let Withered keep selling to them to move to the other side of the books where they can start getting those monthly checks, and that'll put Microsoft where it wants to be, whether the customers wanted to be there or not.
Yeah, that sounds like it's maybe one of your biggest sticking points is this idea that it just doesn't align yet with where you're at. I mean, could you see yourself in some number of years when maybe you're on an older version of the version of Office you're on is outdated and it's time to think about buying new desktop software? Could you at that point take a look at, let's say, Office 365 and maybe some of its competitors and make a decision to go that way with monthly subscriptions rather than buying more licenses?
Well, honestly, I think that's the rest of my team in IT, that's the plan going forward, is to get to Office 365. They're already hosting our email or Exchange or whatever. Well, once again, that's not my technology, so I may use the wrong vocabulary here. But we're going to eventually go to Office 365 because I feel like they feel like we have to go to Office 365.
I see.
once again, it's being triangulated out of your choices, and I'm sure they're going to have some great features in there. But how many of those features could have been done in a non-hosted version? A funny backstory about watching software die on the vine. My previous job, which was at a local city here, once we had GP, we purchased Forecaster, and that product was implemented by somebody at the Microsoft office. I think it was outside of Denver. And at that time, Microsoft was closing down that office. It was something they had inherited when they bought FRX. And I do believe the last day at the office for the person who was implementing for us was the day she finished up our implementation and the office closed. So Microsoft's not afraid to buy something and let it atrophy and then closing it. And just from personal perspective, I've seen that happen. It sort of bothered me because we had just bought it.
Yeah, I could see that being a little annoying, kind of stinging a little bit. And that was where it was acquired out of, wasn't it? Forecaster and FRX.
Yes, I do believe.
Company in Denver, yeah. And I think there are some people at Microsoft, I think I've run into one or two, who actually came out of that acquisition and have stayed with the company in one role or another, but sort of hang on to that. I think they hold on to that history of theirs with pride that they were part of the Forecaster and FRX group.
Yeah, and it was a good product. I mean, it's a complete domination on their part, at least on the FRX side. And
yeah,
I was okay with seeing it go because Management Reporter was, in essence, the next generation. But then Microsoft announces that Amplify that they're no longer going to come out with new versions or whatever the terminology was for GP Management Reporter.
Right. If the old version continues to work with GP and on your desktop, great. But yeah, that was I think that was a big disappointment for users to hear that. But on the other hand, I talk to plenty of vendors who sell other corporate performance management solutions and financial reporting solutions and full scale BI solutions too. And if you talk to them, it's like people really they're in a sense happy. I mean, it's not like it's just giving them anything, but I think they're happy that people are maybe looking beyond the Management Reporter capabilities for financial management at least.
And the Jet product that was announced for free is a good product. I just haven't got everybody to using it yet. Users over such a broad geographic area, it's hard to sit down and get them going with that product and try to do upgrades at the same time. The Jet product was a good substitution. It's just a matter of getting everybody trained up and converting all their existing reports or redoing all their existing reports.
You mentioned sort of that sort of visible slowdown in the roadmap with there's not as many big rocks, there's not as many big improvements in being spent or invested into future GP. It doesn't seem like right now. That might look a little different once they get back to their annual cadence that they're starting next year with, what is it, GP 2018?
Yes.
Just kind of going off memory here. That'll be like a late 2017 release. I think they might try to muster some larger improvements once again, whether it be, something with integration, sort of salvaging, some of the promise of the service-based architecture or, just making it easier to tie in important financial services. Or I don't know. I mean, I could see something else kind of coming out of that space, but I agree. And the other thing that concerns me about the future of GP, not that it's going to go away, I don't believe it is, but just that I think resources have been moved to first they were moved sort of the nav team, it seemed like R&D, developers and product program managers, and that kind of thing, moved to focus on now. But I think what they were really focused on was 365 for financials, and so on the one hand, that's, bad for GP. On the other hand, my sort of running theory, and this is a long-term theory, not something I think will pop up tomorrow, but is that we'll see more and more GP, of the strong GP capabilities for financial management that maybe NAV was lacking, start to show up in 365 for financials. Because the team that worked on GP and Fargo for so long has so much great subject matter expertise in those areas, and so many customers that have relied on those capabilities for so long that as they fill in more, I think they will fill in more of those gaps. And I don't know, 3 years, 4 years from now, I think some GP customers might look at that combination of low price and comparable capabilities, and that could be an aha moment where people say, oh, okay, well, Project Green never worked, but now they basically sort of built something next to our house that looks like a reasonable but newer version of it. That's my running theory. I don't know if it'll actually come to be, but I also do take Microsoft officials at their word when they say that GP goes forward and that there's no plan to halt its development or anything like that.
Well, it would be nice if Microsoft folks would at least smile while they're saying that instead of. I mean, because
There's some mad Microsoft folks who don't like to have to tell people that that's not true. So
yeah, they're very defensive, but the enthusiasm at public events just isn't there with GP. It's there with the GPUG people, which are,
right.
the users and stuff. But in terms of Microsoft staff, there's no rah-rah with GP that would make me as hopeful as
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah.
Within 2 to 3 years, they'll get back to it. As I said earlier, the 2-hour presentation Office 365 when everybody's there to learn about GP, NAV, and I almost said SL, but I don't think SL people participate as much or even call it as much. But it would go a long way if they let the users group be the users group and start doing stuff with Office 365 once there are some Office 365 customers to participate in that users group. Not Office 365, I meant Dynamics 365 customers.
Right. Yeah, and that could be a long time coming. I mean, I think it's a really sort of interesting transition time because there's no denying that there is a lack of not enthusiasm, but I think some of the energy was sucked out of the room for the GP team because resources have been diverted. I mean, it seems pretty obvious. I've had multiple people telling me that developers were shifted over to Nav. And I mean, when you lose developers and you lose the scope of what you can deliver in a given release, I mean, that's got to be frustrating for you if you're, a product manager on that team who still stands in front of customers, who still stands in front of partners and talks about what you can deliver. It's probably not as much as you would like to. Mm-hmm. But, I think, again, that's the kind of decision a software company like Microsoft makes.
Well, I would like if they get back to doing the big boulders, I think that's the term. I would really, really, really like them to maybe get that web client exactly where it needs to be, where it's I don't want to think transparent to experience for those users who are used to using the thick client, but almost all the way there. Maybe they can open more than one window. Maybe they can be asked where they put a file. I mean, this is the same group that finally got GP to ask what printer to use every time they print something. So I know they can do it.
Deal, right?
Yeah. I remember people applauding when they announced the printer dial. Yeah. But, have it the web client and then, show us a fully functional web client and then there's a lot less apprehension, and they can move on and not worry about GP being a going concern.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I saw, this is not a GP thing, this is a NAV thing, but I just want to share it. There was a NAV event last year, and they showed the improvements that Microsoft had made in integrating Excel with NAV 2017, the latest version that just came out. I was very impressed by it personally. I looked at what they had done and their ability to sort of, and granted that it's different because they can piggyback off of some of the 365 development that was done, and that's just unique to them. But to be able to show that this product, which is again not the focus right now. I mean, Nav is more closely related. It's not the one that executives care about with the highest priority or with the highest sort of eye on sort of making progress right now. To see that they've put some very cool integration in there. I think if they could show customers that they've done something like that for GP, it would go a long way. Like if they could show some really, the kind of some kind of real efficiency gains, let's say, so people that are, taking orders or who are, managing, kind of helping customers with some other element of the business, could do it from Outlook and could do reports in a better way from Excel. And I know GP has some of that, but things like that, I think it would go a long way toward making, maybe to your point, to making people feel like it's still there and it still has a seat at the table with some of these new technologies.
Yes, it would. I can't even remember the last time Microsoft purchased an ISV and incorporated it into GP. Recent history, that
Yeah.
would show that they're really caring about the GP product. That hey, we're going to in essence steal it and put it in for everybody to use. Still probably.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see that happen with GP. That's my feeling.
Yeah, but
But
that really, I mean, that's how Smart List came about. It was a third party app, and that ended up
yeah,
being
oh, sure.
the killer app for GP. I know that's probably what brought me in originally. Was my boss really liked Smart List, and we went on, and I've gotten here at my current job, and I got to see Smart View. So it's they can steal things and still acquire things and put that into GP and still have a winning product.
Yeah, I would be amazed if they acquired any other IP for GP at this point. And maybe the only other point I wanted to make on that was with regard to the new article that Martin Olson wrote. He runs an ISV business, and a large chunk of what he wrote was dedicated to actually talking about his own company's personal experience. And if you're going to say something like GP is on a downward slide, you have to counter that or measure it against what he is seeing. And what I do hear from some of the, and I've said this before on our podcast, but some of the better GP resellers that are still around, which is that business remains good for some of them. I mean, by their own account, and they're not opening their books to me, but I tend to take them at their word. They can still sell the heck out of this software, and that's good news for ISVs. I mean, I'm always amazed at just how sort of lucrative the ISV market seems to be for the software vendors who figured out what GP users really need that the product doesn't deliver.
The ISV community is what makes me look smarter than I really am. Because the stuff's not built in. Somebody asks, can we have an audit trail on this? I go, well, then we go out and buy one of the audit trail programs and just amaze people when somebody can see what they can do then. Or the ad hoc reporting or any of the other ISV, the EDI one we've recently acquired. They all make
Okay.
us look smart in the admin field.
Yeah, I just marvel at how many things it's just. I just, it seems to work for everybody that there are these ISVs in the market, and you look to them for all these particular needs. But I mean, they're there, and it's like, well, you need GP. Well, here are our ISVs where you're going to get the rest of your capabilities. It's a little different than most of the other products out there that I see just in the sort of that very, very direct and close give and take between the core ERP and these vendors who are there sort of standing at the ready who have really, E1's a great example. I mean, they've developed really, what's the right word? I don't know. They develop, it's almost like software that most people can't live without. If you're going to have GP, you almost want to have this. And, hats off to these vendors who have figured that out, because it's obviously a great line of business for them. But as Martin also noted, he's looking to the future. He's looking to 365 for his business, and it's in his interest if that product really explodes too, because I'm sure they can use the same talent that's brought them success at GP to bring them success, meeting needs of companies that want to go to app source and, pull in apps to add on to a 365 for financials solution that they're standing up, whether it's point stuff or whether it's some of these even larger solution sets that Microsoft's going to allow ISVs to add, which is something we'll be covering in the future too. I don't know if you know how well understood that is yet, but yeah, there's all sorts of crazy add-on capabilities coming to the 365 realm.
It makes sense to me. I just can't fathom how you get that configured and installed on a configure yourself type thing, or is it meant to not be a configure yourself type thing? Is your partner going to be involved, even though you're going to go to the source and purchase it and install it? Is there, what type of involvement will it take to stand that up? Because just about anything you stand up in ERP
Exactly.
is complicated.
Yeah, I think that's the big question. So you and I will both have to watch for that one. It's such early days still. But the one thing that I think you're right about is that the messaging and the promotion of the newest and flashiest technology will continue. I hope it doesn't irk you too much as you go forward. I think a lot of people have you included, have made their voices heard about that in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah. If Microsoft intends to keep going and isn't going to do what I'm afraid they are, just stand up front, be very happy, announce GP is going to be more than just around or staying. That
Mm-hmm.
you're going to continue to make this a winning product because there will be lots of people that have it now or lots of people that don't even know they want it that will have it in the future. Right now, it just sounds like placating the current customer base instead of actually selling something, which I know goes against the thing that Martin said. Partners can sell really sell GP. Well, I'm not meeting a lot of new GP customers in this area right now.
Okay.
They're existing GP customers.
Yeah. Again, something we definitely want to watch for. I hear it all the time, and it's a bit of a complex picture to sort of paint based on different people's reports.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I wish you good luck. I hope I do run into you in Nashville at that next conference, if not before. And thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me here. It's been fun.
It has been fun. Thank you for inviting me here.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the MSDW Podcast. If you want to be on the podcast or just get in touch, you can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is the MSDW Podcast signing off.